What I wanted to do was to share a few words this evening about what climate justice means to me. So I looked up the definition of justice, and there's one definition that stood out to me, and it was this: the quality of being just, righteousness, equitableness, or moral rightness. And if that's not pronounced properly, I'm just going to say Google told me that's how it's pronounced. I mentioned earlier on, a lot of you wouldn't have been here at that time, that I believe the subject of climate justice cannot be removed from the subject of social justice, because of my absolute belief, and I would argue it's a fundamental truth, that they are inextricably linked. Because what we are witnessing, which should come as no surprise for anybody, is that for the most part, those who have contributed least to the problem of climate change are also those who are suffering the greatest impacts the quickest. We also know that it will be the poorest and most vulnerable, even in our own society here in Jersey, who will be hit first if we continue to fail to tackle climate change and environmental breakdown. I remember writing a poem when I was 10 years of age at primary school, and of course I'm sure some of you will be doubting whether I can remember that long ago, but actually I can. And I still remember the words of that poem, so I wanted to share them with you, something I wrote, as I said, when I was 10. If we carry on as we are today, just wasting our land away, no thought for conservation, without exaggeration, our animals will become rare and our land will look sparse and bare. Pollution, corruption and destruction, action must be taken now. So like I said, I hate to admit it, but I wrote that poem over 30 years ago. And what pains me most is that very little action was taken by those who had ultimate power, and that continues to be the truth today. Obviously, like many others I've witnessed on the news and online, the destruction of the environment, and we see it of course to a lesser degree in terms of scale in Jersey. But I witnessed the most incomprehensible stupidity of humans when I served as a human rights monitor in Palestine in 2018. Not just when I witnessed and felt the effects of the environmental toxin tear gas, but when I witnessed the impact of the stealing of precious water resources, including to water the very thirsty European pine trees that have been planted to remind the European settlers and colonisers of their homelands, an act that has resulted in the acidification of the soil and has increased the incidences of wildfires and all the damage that that brings. I know that many others will have witnessed similar as they've gone on their travels in different areas and lands. Damaging practices as people ignore the traditions and wisdom of our land protectors, the indigenous peoples, as they try to subjugate land and nature, which cannot be subjugated without a real cost to the environment and the delicate fabric that is the web of life. It's important for us to remember that those who are at this time on the front line of environmental destruction and now breakdown, who have also been those who for decades have been fighting for climate justice to protect our planet and the lives and futures of us all, are also those from the most targeted and marginalised communities. The indigenous tribes of the world in the Amazon, the First Nation members of the other Americas, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Sami people of the Nordic nations, and the tribes in Africa. Many of those communities and peoples are witnessing environmental breakdowns in their lands as a consequence of our global economic model that demands infinite resources and growth in a finite world. The corporations entailed with ensuring this by drilling, mining, trawling these nations also ensure compliance and often corrupt governments that will then suppress the people when they try to stand up as land and water protectors. These polluted proceeds too often are invested in territories, unfortunately, including our very own island, which is why we also must recognise not just our desire to make changes to protect ourselves and our children's futures, but also our island, including our government's obligation to take serious, immediate and necessary action in order to address environmental breakdown. The economic interests of the 1% cannot be put ahead of our very real island and global fight for survival. We must recognise our place within the global community to take our place amongst the families of nations and islands and unite with our brothers and sisters. We of the 99% must do whatever it takes to push ourselves back from the brink before tomorrow comes and our chance is to take it is lost. We must stand up against the Trumps, the Johnsons, the Bolsonaros, the Morrisons, and we must ignore the climate deniers or those that seek to label us radical, including those in our local government, and demand our rights and the rights of our species to exist on this planet. This planet does not belong to anyone, but as the Native Americans say, belongs rather and always to our grandchildren. There is nothing radical about demanding the right to live. So again, I ask us all to recognise the time that we're living in. It is time to put out the fires and light the resistance. Thank you.